When someone is going through a storm, your silent presence is more powerful than a million empty words. This is Silent Presence with Rich Patricia. It's a show about caring, a moment for understanding, a time to think about those around you. In a time of increased stress and uncertainty, your silent presence is more powerful than a million empty words. And now, the host of Silent Presence, Rich Patricia.
Hi, welcome to Silent Presence. Thank you once again for listening and allowing me to share my personal story and the stories of others with you. On this show, I like to discuss topics on addiction, mental health, grief, and the ability to move forward and find happiness in your daily life. My guest today is an international speaker, life legacy consultant, author of Grief, Navigating the 3 Levels of Loss, and creator of the Affluence Code. Today she'll share her insights, experiences, and strategies for living powerfully. Ladies and gentlemen, Alison Pena. Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Rich.
I really appreciate it. You have a lot of experience with what we're going to be speaking about today, and this is a very difficult topic for most people to talk about and deal with in their lives. Losing a loved one, losing a friend. You dealt with loss in your own ways as well.
Yes, I did. My husband and I were together for 3 weeks short of 25 years. And October of 2015, he had not been feeling well. And we'd gone to all kinds of doctors. And I think we went to the ER 3 times. And we went to regular doctors 3 times. And nobody could tell us what was wrong.
Okay.
And finally, someone said, get a CAT scan. And so October 12th, 2015, they said, you need to go see the doctor right now. And we thought, oh my gosh, that's never good.
That's something that nobody likes to hear.
Nobody likes to hear that. Yeah, it's not usually good news.
Right.
And they said he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
And stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the lifespan at that point is 6 weeks to 4 months.
Okay.
That's what they expect. And so they go, okay, you need to get everything in order. So if you don't have a will, get a will. If you don't have so you're suddenly completely shocked and scrambling to deal with all these details. And Googling stage 4 pancreatic cancer is, a straight walk to despair.
Not a good idea,
Not
right?
helpful.
No.
No.
It could drive you crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I know when I was dealing with my son and his addiction was a terrible time. And just talking about it right now and speaking to people like yourself is helpful to me, and hopefully it'll be helpful to so many other people as well.
Yeah, there's sort of 2 ways that it comes to people. One of the things I used to say a lot, which I was sort of astonished that people were so shocked. I said, you will lose someone, as I have. You will be a caregiver, and you will die yourself.
And that's a given.
People were astonished by that.
Right. Well, people don't want to hear that. That's something that people just don't think about or want to think about.
Right, but it's a sure thing. Like, nobody gets out alive.
Especially during the time that we're living right now, there are so many people that are living in that exact situation where they don't know what to do.
And so if you have time, there's not actually a way to prepare. So people say, get ready. And you can get ready with some things if it doesn't come too fast. So you can sort of work on sorting out finances, and you can work on thinking through some things. But if it's very sudden, you don't have that time.
And you didn't really have that much time. I
had more time than I thought I would, because my husband lived 11 months.
Okay.
So he died September 10th at 10:10. And it was just 3 weeks short of our 20th anniversary. And so we had a lot of time. He went from being 263 pounds to 146 pounds.
Oh, my.
By the end. And he was 6'3". He was a big guy. And I'm sure that you found this also with your son. It's so devastating to be helpless in the face of this.
I absolutely agree. It is. It's a helpless situation. It's interesting that you know the exact time that your husband passed away. I know the exact time and date and moment that my son passed away. And It's something that's ingrained in you. It's just something that doesn't leave.
No. And one of the things that made it easier, if there is an easier, was that we just decided for the time we had left to live full tilt boogie, to really take a good sharp look at what we really cared about, and And, you know, my husband was likely to go, oh, yeah, I'll help you out with this. And I put my foot down. I said, no, you're doing only the things that you most love. You're going to paint. You're going to play tennis.
And I hear he was an excellent painter. I saw some of his pictures online and some of the things that you had shared, and they're absolutely beautiful. And that's something that he really wanted to do. And I applaud you for not giving up on those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they tell you, you know, as he got less energy, you know, there were heartbreaking things. So he had been told that the chemo would cause him to lose his hair. And so he went and he got a haircut so it would be less stark when he lost his hair. And then 1 or 2 days later, he loved to ride city bikes around the city. I live in New York.
Right.
And he came back and he told me that there was cutting into his eyes as he rode. And as he rode, his hair and his eyelashes and his eyebrows were coming off from the chemo. And it was so devastating. I mean, the small things, some of the small things are just so devastating. And as a person who loves a person like that, you can't do anything.
No. Was there a time that you felt yourself that you were having a hard time dealing with all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a real challenge for me because there was my instinct not to show him how devastated I was.
Of course.
And there really is a, you know, I would say, oh my gosh, I really need to go and do this and take care of myself. And he would say, but I'm the one with cancer.
And you did eventually find a time where you said, I have to live fearlessly. You know, I have to take a stand.
Yeah. I mean, I needed to remember that I was not just a caregiver because that was my whole life, was being a caregiver for him. And I would not just be a widow. So one of the things I did was I had always wanted to sing in a cabaret show. And I'd sung in gospel choirs and stuff, but I'd never sung songs myself, just on a stage. And in the course of the time he was sick, I sang in 2 shows.
That's wonderful.
And I sang songs to remind myself that I was not just a caregiver, that I was sort of still a woman, even though I didn't feel like one. I was still valuable outside of the caregiving role. So the last stage I sang on before he died was the Tuesday before he died. And he died in my arms on Saturday. And the songs I sang were I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor. Everybody Says Don't, which is kind of about standing up to people saying I had to do things, had to be certain ways, and just resisting. And then the last one was The Secret of Happiness, which was about that happiness is about being present. Because I had a lot of pushback towards the end. He died in my arms at home, and there was nobody else here except us. But there were a lot of people who said, you can't do this. You have to put him in a hospital.
But that's not where he wanted to be, right?
It's not where he wanted to be. It's not where I wanted him to be.
Absolutely.
And I said, you know, you don't know what I can handle. They said, well, but what if he gets incontinent? I said, well, then I clean him up. I mean, you don't put a baby in a hospital because it poops.
Right.
You know?
I love your sense of humor and the way that you speak candidly about all of this. I think that most people have a hard time talking about this, and the way that you're speaking about it right now, very candid.
Well, people are so frightened of their own mortality, which makes no sense because everybody dies.
That's true.
And, you know, I'm in New York. I'm opposite a hospital, and I am counting 10, 11 ambulances down below right now. Yeah, I mean, each one of these ambulances, we see them draw up, we see them carry someone in, and the thought is, will the person they carry in come out alive?
And along with that, you have 20, 30 family members, many friends of each one of those individuals that are going through exactly what you and I have gone through. And for those people, what do you say to people that are dealing with loss?
Well, I mean, what I would say is that life is short and life is precious. And there really is not time to live not doing what you're meant to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I most learned was that living with someone who our time together was going to end sooner rather than later. And so we lived like it would be tomorrow or it would be the next minute. And so living that level of fearless, unbelievably powerful.
Some people might say, well, you're different than me. We all grieve differently.
Yeah, everybody does grieve differently. I would say that the most important thing is to let yourself be. The first year, pretty much, I was awash in grief. I honestly thought I would never see the end of it. I could not see a time where I would not feel this way. And the future that I had imagined, I was with this man for 25 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. So I'm a consultant, but I couldn't reach out and talk to anybody. I had no capacity to talk to people. My husband had a studio downtown that he had been in for 30 years. If you've ever moved from a place where you had a lot of stuff.
Just going through my son's bedroom was immensely difficult. It actually took a year to just step foot in there.
Yeah, well, and I had half the income for a New York City apartment plus a studio to pay for suddenly when I was completely incapacitated. And paint is a very smelling and visual thing.
Right.
And so I had to go in there pretty much every day and smell the clove oil and smell the oils and smell all this stuff and somehow move it out. And I literally, at times, he painted weddings. And so he had this big trunk that he carried his wedding painting stuff too. And it hadn't been opened since he died. It had been months. And I was going to give it to another friend who did the same kind of work. And it was on the floor. And I looked at it and I couldn't open it by myself. And I went down the hall and I got an artist friend of his and I said, I am really sorry, but I need you to come and help me open this. And we opened it and all the smells came out and I lost it, burst into tears. And I just needed someone there with me to do it.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to the point where you felt, okay, I'm really starting to do well?
3 years. 3 years before I was really steady on my feet.
Yeah.
1 year I was awash in grief. The second year it was anger. It goes from 0 to rage in about 30 seconds. And it's really hard to explain why the emotions are so wild. And it's really hard to explain why you can't move on as fast as other people think you should be able to. I found that I had about a year before people were ready for me just to be done.
Right. Well, I'm in year 2. And I have to tell you that my first year, I think it was more of a shock. And then the second year came around, and I think you find that all the people that were there for you during that first year, they go back to normal, right? I mean, everybody goes back to normal anyway. And it's almost more difficult during that second year in dealing with loss.
Yeah, because the networks have gone back to their regular life and they don't understand that it's still at the center of yours. The things that I did in the first year were different from the things I wound up doing in the second year. So the first year, I couldn't remember to eat because I could feel hungry. And then I had about 2 minutes to get to the kitchen before I forgot I was hungry. So I stuck baskets of food all over the house so that I would have a visual reminder, oh, food, need to eat. But it was the only way I could figure out to extend that time frame where I could remember I was hungry and remember to go to the kitchen. I mean, I had a little sign on my door for a long time. It said shoes, keys, coat, because these were things I wasn't remembering.
And it's interesting because you could just sit there and sit in a chair or sit on the couch for a long period of time and just waste that time away during the day. And the time goes fast. Well,
the other thing that I found, there were some very clear physical things that happened after Dave died that were really difficult. I got spots in my memory, so I would lose pieces of memory. And sometimes it was 5 minutes and sometimes it was a week. I couldn't hold on to time at all. And it made me feel like I was completely crazy, honestly.
I think what you're saying is something that most people deal with when they go through loss, especially with someone that's very close to them. Without a doubt, I would say that these are the things that are brought out so many times and feelings that people are feeling. So they're normal. They're human. This is something that they need to go through. You spoke about 3 levels of loss and the best ways that you found to navigate through them.
As I was going through my grieving process and my coming back to whole and resourceful and finding resilience again, the thing that sort of inspired me was that when I became a widow, people started treating me like I was broken and like I was fragile and like I might stay that way forever. And from my perspective, it felt that way to me too. So at a certain point, I had to sort of pull myself together and remember that that wasn't actually who I was, that I wasn't broken, that the circumstances were really awful, and I was really in the middle of it, but I was not broken. And so if you're not broken, then you can come back to whole, right? You just need to figure out how to do that. So the first level is just flat out grieving the loss. And that level is a lot of feelings. What are the feelings that are actually happening? Because if you try to roll over the feelings, they will come back like a volcano later and it will be ugly. Mm-hmm. So finding a way to let yourself be. Now, people are really uncomfortable with feelings. So I had a lot of, oh, I'm so sorry I made you cry. And my thought was, you're not that important.
I have more important things to cry about, right?
Right, exactly. And I would get irritated, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of, how dare you think that you're the one who has me crying? But because people are so uncomfortable with my tears, at a certain point, I realized that what they wanted to know was that I was okay. And so when I went to a family gathering, especially, I started doing this. I would say, look, I'm sad a lot and I might cry in the course of this time. Just know that I'm okay. You don't have to do anything. Because it's really irritating when someone tries to come and fix you when you're crying.
Well, the bottom line is that nobody can really fix you. You have to be able to fix yourself and deal with that. And, everybody says, is there anything I can do? And yeah, just be there. And this is where my, the show Silent Presence comes in, because I think it's so important for people to just understand, you don't have to do anything. All you need to do is be there to listen. Just be there as a person who's there to be by my side if I'm down, but don't necessarily try to fix it, because there's nothing that you can do to fix me. I have to do that myself.
Well, and fixing implies that someone's broken.
That's true too.
You're not broken. You're hurt, devastated, but broken is something very different. And I'm really pretty strong in this distinction. If the world thinks you're broken, so what? You can get past that. If you yourself take that on, that you're broken, then that's a bigger problem. That's a much bigger problem. So I started baby stepping. Okay, well, what do I need? And I started giving myself net. So, telling someone at a party, I might cry. I'm okay. And really letting myself experience the loss of this man I had loved for 25 years, almost half my lifetime. So the second phase was to start figuring out what I wanted as myself individually. When you get together with someone in a relationship, there are things that you give up when you're just getting along and going along that maybe you would keep otherwise. And so getting back that autonomy was amazing, except that I didn't actually know what I liked. We'd been together so long that we were wound around each other like vines. And it was really hard for me to figure out, well, do I like playing tennis? Do I like this kind of food? Do I like this kind of person, this kind of gathering? So I began making distinctions. I began trying different things and figuring out what in my own right I love to do. What kind of people are toxic to me? I let some people go. I realized I needed other people around me more in my life. So the second level was to really get clear about what I wanted specifically, because people were asking me all the time, what can I do for you? How can I help? And early on, it was like, bring my husband back. Except that's impossible.
I like the one thing that you brought up about the second level, and that is, unfortunately, you do need to pick and choose who is important in your life to help you and guide you in the right direction and be there for you. Because you find out that there were so many people in your life that just made you feel worse. You have to pick and choose. I mean, it does become a matter of survival, I feel, at that point. I need to be well. I need to get better. And in order to do that, I can't have this, and this surrounding me.
I mean, people in my life, they stepped up, they stepped back, or they stepped out. And it was surprising. The other thing is that very often people, they wanted to help so badly. And so they looked at my situation and they thought about what they would do if they were in my situation. They saw it. And then they would say, you must do this. You need to do this.
Thank you. Move on.
Exactly. And it was honestly not from meanness for the most part. Right. It was from caring, except that was not what I needed. What I needed was someone to say, I will stand with you where you are. And when you're ready to move from this spot, I'll move with you at your own pace. But it's not that easy to do.
No, not at all. And when you're experiencing loss that's so close to you, you do tend to get angry, and your feelings and emotions just change so much. And even though all of the people, and I have to say, there are so many people out there that tried to help me, and I'm sure tried to help you along the way to better deal, to better, live your life or whatever. But it does get to the point where it's like, okay, just be that silent presence. You don't have to say anything. Don't tell me what to do. Just be there.
Yep.
Be there and
Yep.
listen.
I mean, one of the most useful things that I did was I gave a piece of advice in a blog post I wrote called Grief, Brain, and Bills. And I had paid the rent sort of upfront with the help of my family for a while. And so it was March, and my landlord said, "Where's the rent?" And I said, "Oh, it's all taken care of." And she said, "That ended in February." And it was the 23rd of March. And I had no idea where the rent was coming from. And so I wrote this blog post that was like, wow. And I knew that I would figure it out. So it wasn't from a, oh my gosh, please help me, anything of that tone. But I just wrote out exactly what this experience had been for me. And then at the end, I said, because I kept having people say, "But I don't know how to deal with you." So I wrote this thing. I said, if you are dealing with a person like me, then the first thing you do is you have a conversation with them and you see how they are, what's going on. And then based on that conversation, you make a suggestion. Hey, how about if I take care of this? And then if they agree, then you go ahead and you execute, asking for guidance as needed. And I can't even tell you how many people said that was an incredibly useful piece of advice.
It is.
For someone dealing with someone.
Because so many people will leave that generic, if there's anything you need. And I saw a great comedian, a local comedian, Glenn Tickle, who I hope to have on the show at some point. And he was really making fun of it in a way, because he had lost his brother. And he was really saying, well, my sister turned around and every person that walked in the room, he said, yes, I could really go for a coffee right now from this establishment. And so they would leave, they'd bring back a coffee, she'd hold on to it and just take it and put it on the shelf with 7, 8 other coffees that were back there. And they were like, well, why? You asked if I could do anything and you have all these coffees. And she's like, I love coffee. Thank you so much. And it's interesting, if you think about it, because, everybody makes these promises, like, if there's anything I can do, but really how many people mean it when the time comes? So I think, making those types of promises and saying those types of things, they're nice. And it's something that we all do. I've done it myself.
Absolutely.
But, if you're going to say something like that, you better be ready to do it.
And on the part of the person who suffered the loss, how do you provide a framework where you can give them something actionable that's actually something you need? Because there's, and I heard this a lot from widows and widowers in the groups I was in. Well, they should just know. But that's as unrealistic as going on your first date and expecting the person to know exactly what you like. It's ridiculous.
That's right.
How can they know? They haven't experienced the loss unless they have had a loss of their own, in which case they're going to be less tone deaf. But if they haven't, then they really don't know, and they can't be expected to know. So I started creating frameworks for the people who wanted to help me and who really cared about me to actually help in ways that I needed. And really how I went through my loss was, oh my gosh, I'm running up against this challenge. What do I need? And then I would build that. Because I couldn't find it anywhere. I mean, the other thing that I found out in the face of this, in this second level, was that people really, really wanted to give me what I needed, but they needed to win because they were treating me like I was fragile. And if they got it wrong, I got angry. And so I needed to be so clear about what I was asking for so that they couldn't get it wrong.
That's a great point.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. And, I'm sure, and just like you said, they felt better knowing this, knowing exactly what you needed from them. And you find yourself not only dealing with loss, but you find yourself having to show others that are really close to you or that love you and care about you and want to do great things for you, you have to guide them along to help you.
Yes.
And that becomes a lot of work in itself, too.
It does, which is why I highly recommend creating frameworks, not making people guess. That's why it's so important to be clear about what you want and what you need, because then you can look through the people that you know and you can ask those people for that thing and they will give it to you, like 90% of the time.
That's great advice.
It was crazy because we go into asking for stuff like people don't want to give it to us. And the reason people don't give us what we want is we're either too vague, so they can't be sure of delivering what we want, and so they're not going to try. Or it's not something that makes our own hearts sing. People, when they're together, they can feel a lie. If you're asking for something that's not fully what your heart wants, people aren't going to be excited about giving it to you. Why should they be? You're not excited about asking for it.
That's true.
The other thing that I started teaching people was to have a shorter framework. And actually, in this time of this coronavirus pandemic, people are experiencing loss. 3 weeks ago, it was famous figures who were catching this. Now it's the parents of some of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Now one of my mother's good friends has died. Now it's much closer than it was. And so there's a lot of fear about that. And so asking shorter term questions is more useful, because how are you in that first year was, well, I'm looking at a wasteland of grief. How are you? Was really like that. But how are you today? How are you right now? That can be answered. The other thing was energy. So energy ebbed and flowed for a long time, still does sometimes. If you've experienced a loss, I get blindsided every year by certain things. I am dissolved in tears on my husband's birthday, on our anniversary, sometimes on the day he died, and it's been a few years.
Even myself, when I started the journey, it was second by second. And I remember saying that it's second by second by second. And I remember people telling me, eventually to become minute by minute. And it did. And then it was day by day. And now, especially with what's going on right now, I almost find myself feeling a little guilty again, not thinking so much about him and more about what we're dealing with right now. And it's just kind of interesting. But then there are those moments, there are those days, and it could happen at any time, any place, anywhere. It doesn't make a difference. It could be on his birthday. It could be, on a special day. And you just find yourself crying.
And that's perfectly natural.
Yeah.
And what you know and what I know about loss informs on some level our ability to be more stable right now.
Yes.
Than a lot of people.
Oh, it's interesting just listening to people that I know and how scared they are. And I sit back and I say, I've been through one of the most difficult things that I think I could ever have to deal with. And really, to be honest with you, nothing right now is bothering me.
I can't quite say that, but
well, yeah, and you're also
in New York City.
You're in New York City, and you're right across from a hospital. So of course, it's going to be. I live in the mountains, so I don't see too much of it, but it's still concerning.
We have here over 200,000 infected and over 10,000 dead.
It's really sad.
It's pretty stark here. But what we know is that stability is an inside game. Finding peace is an inside game. It requires being willing to let the feelings be when they are and not to dictate them. So there was a lot of expectation that I would be a certain way for as long as other people said. And some moments I was weeping and other moments I was laughing. In 2018, was able to get back to work. My first job was in a Halloween pop-up store when I had been a proofreader and medical editor, which was super detailed work, but I had no memory and no energy, so I couldn't do that.
Understandable.
I couldn't consult. Anything I was paid for, I couldn't do anymore. But I could hang hangers up, and I could take a baby step and just get back to working at something. And that's the first thing I did. And so I baby stepped myself up, and my energy ebbed and flowed, and it even still does sometimes. And when I had a lot of energy, I did as much as I could, as fast as I could, because I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. And when I had less energy, I just took really good care of myself.
And that's the most important thing. How do you feel about people who compartmentalize? They'll take that grief and they just set it aside and they don't allow themselves to actually come out with their emotions.
It causes a breakdown later, because if you stuff emotions down for long enough, then there will be an explosion. You can't cap a volcano. And if we push ourselves too hard and too fast, we break down.
That's correct.
So if we're running too fast, we break something. If we're burnt out, we have a mental breakdown. So if we overload our systems, we will be stopped if we won't stop ourselves.
That's true. It'll take over us. It's not that we have control over it all the time.
Exactly.
Why do you call yourself the bad widow?
Because when I became a widow, I discovered that people had a lot of assumptions that were just flat out wrong about how to treat me, about how to deal with someone who had experienced such a loss. And so I called myself bad widow because I was willing to have those conversations that said, no, that's not how it is for me. Today I'm happy. Yes, I know it's been a month, but today I'm happy. I like it because it makes people ask. And I got a lot of judgment for charging forward the way that I have with this. Some people found it inspiring, but other people were like, it's just rude that you're not letting me fix you.
Well, yeah, but that's fulfilling other people's egos and not necessarily helping you. And
Exactly.
and the fact is, this is how you're helping yourself. You're helping yourself by having a blog and putting out books, and I'm helping myself deal and get through a lot of the things that I'm dealing with, continue to deal with by having a podcast. But if just one person listens to this and can appreciate some of the things that are being said, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the third level, so I did two already. One is healing after loss. The second is figuring out who the heck you are after loss and reinventing yourself. And the third is rebuilding your community. So the people stepped up, they stepped back, and they stepped out. And what happened is that when this happens, we lose resources. So who are you going to the gym with? Maybe they left. We think of networks as professional. Who's going to refer business to you? But we exist in networks all the time. And after a loss, we have a lot of holes in those networks. And typically what we do with community is that we wait for it to just fix itself. And what I realized is that I could actually look at my community and assess it and see if I needed to start looking actively for people to fill those spots where I was missing somebody. So I started thinking about the people in my network as what were the resources that they were? What was I calling this person up to talk about? Or what kind of activities did I like to do with that person and that person's now gone? And so the third level is rebuilding your network proactively so that you have what you need to support yourself even better than you did before. So that's sort of baseline, my three levels.
I know that you also consider other forms of loss of a business, loss of a job, loss of other things. You say loss is loss regardless.
Loss is loss regardless. So I define loss in a very particular way. Loss is the death of a future imagined or co-created that will now never come to pass. So if you think about that, you lose a person from your life, my husband, your son. If you lose a job, all that network that was in your job, all the things you were proud of that you did there, everything is gone. It's a seismic shift.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's a loss by my definition.
It's almost like you feel guilty. Okay, well, my loss isn't as bad as your loss. Your loss wasn't as bad as my loss. Like I lost a son. Well, who ever thinks about that? I mean, I've always considered that before I lost my son as being one of the most horrific things that could ever happen to anyone. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that you're attached to your husband, you're attached to your friend, you're attached to your business, you're attached to all of these things. And you're right, loss is loss. And no one's is any worse than anyone else's because you're dealing with your own personal loss.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend who called me up and she was in the midst of getting a divorce. And she said, oh, and she was telling me how hard it was. And she said, oh, but I shouldn't be talking to you about this because yours is so much worse than mine. And I said, not for you. For you, it's pretty bad. For you, it's a loss. And in those instances where it's a choice, so you might choose to leave a job or get downsized, but you would have liked to stay, or you might choose to divorce someone because it's no longer a fit. And there's a lot of judgment about grieving those losses, but it's still the death of a future imagined or co-created that will never come to pass.
I'm glad we got to talk about that, because I know that that's something that, a lot of people deal with and they're afraid to talk about. And, is mine worse than yours? Who cares? Loss is loss. What do you like the most about what you do now with your writings, with your traveling and speaking engagements, with your blog? What is it that you get out of that?
With the things that I talk about, I wind up inspiring people. And I talk about business, I talk about dating, I talk about loss, I talk about pretty much anything that interests me where I might be able to make a contribution. And what happens is I had someone write me and she said, now I understand why I've been grieving this one loss for 40 years and have never gotten over it. And what I've seen with my speaking is that when I speak, I pretty much always say something that somebody needs to hear, which was your point about doing the podcast. There's one person who hears something that they need. It's worth it.
I always say that to my students. I say, if you can do something that just changes one person's life, one person's direction, you've done your job, and that should make you feel great.
Yeah, because that one person, let's think about the ripple effect. As you said, there are people in the hospital, and then there's a ripple effect of everyone connected with them that are being impacted. And so that one person, if that one person hears something and they go, oh, wow, I needed that today. Now I see how I can go forward. That person also impacts their circle, their pond.
So
They're
true.
Creating their own ripple.
I always believe in just, being kind to one another, caring for one another, being there for one another in whatever way you need to, but also don't expect everything to be perfect. And just do the things that you feel are best and do them with the right intentions, and hopefully everything works out.
Yep. I want to say one more thing, because this is why I do everything I do. And we talked about a little bit earlier. We live in a world where it's assumed that circumstances can break us. And it's just not true. It's a lie. So if by my speaking and my writing and all the stuff that I do, I can have a massive number of people see that they are not broken, that they have in them resilience, resourcefulness, that they can come back to whole from any circumstance, I've done my work. And then that's the cool thing. The ripple effect from people who know that they are resilient and resourceful, the decisions they make, the actions they take are so much more potent. And I believe that if everyone knew that, we could change the world. We could handle all of the challenges in the world pretty quickly. So that's my soapbox.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really appreciate that.
That's my soapbox.
That's great.
So what do I have coming forward? I am in the process of writing a book. I am starting to give a workshop, like a 90-minute virtual workshop every couple of weeks in some aspect of what I do. I am writing, speaking actively, consulting, selling art.
That's great.
I'm busy.
Please continue to do all of the great work that you're doing. And at some point, I really hope to have you back. Maybe once your book is done, we can have you back. And
that would be great.
We could talk about that. I really appreciate having you on the show today. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. badwidow.com. I do offer a 20-minute resilience breakthrough call that's complimentary, where we can talk about specific challenges. I can steer you to various resources, and I would love for you to take me up on that.
Our guest today has been Alison Pena, author of Grief, Navigating the 3 Levels of Loss, and creator of the Affluence Code. For more information about Alison, or to find out where you can order a copy of her new book, which is coming out soon, you can go to her website at badwidow.com. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please feel free to share it with others and visit my website at silentpresencepodcast.com.
Thanks for listening to Silent Presence. Tune in next week for another amazing guest. And remember, Be kind to one another. You may just be the silent presence they need. For more information, visit silentpresencepodcast.com.